We know ground up construction can be expensive, and the cost for value add multifamily has gone up as well. Well, that's why today's guest found another solution that helped them create value for multifamily investing. That's right. Today we sit down with Brian Sudeck, and he and his company at Sage Investments. They have invested in over 24 hotel to apartment conversion deals where they buy existing hotel and motels and convert them into multifamily apartments. He explains why this strategy has been so successful for them, how they've been able to create value for themselves and their investors, and why you should think about hotel to apartment conversions yourself. If you want to learn more about creating great value, make sure you check out this conversation right here on Multifamily Insights. When you think you found a great deal, asking the right questions could be the difference in finding a stud or a dud. Listen, we've put together a new guide to help you out. It's called 7 Questions You Must Ask Before Investing in Apartments. Now, in this guide, you're going to learn how to uncover red flags, quickly identify underwriting risk, vet sponsors and team members, and confirm key assumptions. Now, this is a guide that's going to help you be a better investor, whether you're an active investor or you're a passive investor looking to partner with other operators. Asking better questions is the key to identifying great opportunities. So download this free guide. Go to our website, casmoncapital.com/7 questions. That's the number 7 questions. And you can access this free guide today. To make it easy on you, though, we've put a link in our show notes. So you go to the show notes, you can click that link and access the guide right now. This guide's going to help you make better investment choices, asking the right questions to build your portfolio. So be sure to download it today. Pascal Wagner is a former venture capitalist turned real estate investor, mainly a passive real estate investor, who has built a $250,000 a year portfolio through over 30 investments. Now, as a VC at Techstars, he deployed $150 million into 300 companies where he learned how top financial institutions analyze deals, manage risk, and make smart investment choices. Let's welcome to the show, Pascal Wagner.
Thanks so much for having me, John. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely right. Great to have you on. I read a few lines of your bio, but why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Happy to. Yeah, so Ryan Sudeck, CEO of Sage Investment Group. I have the honor and privilege of helping lead the team here. As John mentioned, our mission is to help address the affordable housing crisis, and the way in which we do that is we buy hotels and we convert them into apartments across the country. So we've done this about 24 times now, and we've got a team of almost 30 folks within the Sage family. We run an evergreen fund to raise equity and scale that platform. Prior to Sage, my background was in mergers and acquisitions. So instead of buying real estate, I was helping companies buy other companies and doing real estate investing on my own on the weekends. So I was buying multifamily properties and had the privilege of chatting with my now partners, Ross and Emily Hubbard, who started Sage back in 2020. Had the privilege of chatting with them about 3 years ago and talking to them about wanting to scale my own efforts in real estate investing. And it's an area that I'm super passionate about from, past experience working with my dad as a kid, and was fortunate enough to have them welcome me as CEO just a little over 2 years ago. The three of us had been working together for almost a decade now on some of the real estate investing efforts. And we've been able to grow a team and feel really great about just combining this mission that's solving a real need with great financial returns for our investors as well.
I love it, man. You talk about investing yourself in multifamily and partnering up with Emily and Ryan there on what they were working on and being able to grow Sage and focusing really on these conversions of, hotels and motels, converting them into apartments. And that's really the business model. You do it nationwide, 24 deals done up to this point. Love that approach that you have. Let's start there. Why hotel and motel conversions? What's the opportunity and what did you see in the marketplace?
The most important thing to understand is that hotels are fundamentally valued different than apartment buildings are. So for folks who understand cap rates, a hotel cap rate's significantly higher than a multifamily cap rate or an apartment cap rate. So it might be a hotel cap rate might be at a 12, where an apartment cap rate might be a 6 or 7. If you think about it just as a revenue multiple, so the revenue that the property generates times a multiple gives you a value. On hotels, it's 3 to 4 times the revenue they generate, whereas an apartment building, it's 7 to 12 times the revenue that it generates. So when we buy a hotel property and we convert it into residential use, we see at least a 40% increase in value over what it costs us to do that development work. There's a lot of heavy development work that goes into that to bring it up to code, to add kitchens, to make these really a vibrant community that lives like a brand new property. But there's a phenomenal return potential. We did our first project in Tucson, Arizona back in 2019, our first hotel conversion project. Before that, we've been doing value add multifamily projects, and then previous to that, single family. And that was really the light bulb moment for us. We bought this 175 unit property. Half of it had already been converted from a hotel to apartments. So the plan was laid out for us, and we just had to convert the second half. Well, we delivered into 2020. We planned to lease out to students, thinking, oh, students live in small rooms. We're right down the street from U of A. Well, there were no students on campus in 2020 because of COVID. We had to pivot our marketing strategy, and it leased up really overnight. And that was the light bulb moment, as we say, because that just clued us into how much demand there is for naturally affordable units, and just the fundamentals of how the returns work, like I mentioned, from just the dislocation and the difference between how the two different types of properties are valued.
So Ryan, what do those units look like? Because you mentioned the valuation, which makes a lot of sense, right? The hotels are valued on a 3 to 4 equity multiple based on the revenue. When you get into apartments, that's going to be more in the 7 to 8 x revenue valuation. So it's just it's easier to have those apartments be worth more because they're going to generate the revenue versus hotels. With that said, what do the actual units look like on a conversion? Are they standard for typical apartments? Are these micro units? Like, what does that end up looking like?
They're fully amenitized studio units. So we typically take the hotel units as they are and we convert them into apartment units. So most times that's delivering studio units. We're usually looking for between 100 and 200 units per property. At 100 units, that allows us to have economies of scale on our construction and development. It allows us to have on-site property management to deliver a great resident experience. And on the high end of that, we usually don't want to take on a community of greater than 200 units because we don't want to oversaturate the market in that area. The units themselves, we put in full kitchens. So think stove, oven, microwave, fridge, freezer. We're kind of adding that kitchen on what's usually the other side of the bathroom wall in a hotel room. Totally refinishing the interior. So new floors, casework, paint. A lot of times we're having to do infrastructure upgrades like adding sprinkler systems, new electrical panels. We take all the amenity spaces too and repurpose them. We don't need conference. You don't need conference space in an apartment building, but our tenants love a large fitness center, or we've got indoor golf simulators going in one, or co-working space if they're working from home. So at the end of the day, typically you've got a 300 square foot studio unit with a kitchen in it and fully renovated with great amenities. That's kind of the end product for our tenants.
How do you know if a hotel or motel is right for conversion? Like, what data, what stats are you looking for?
It starts with the market. So we want to make sure that we're going into a growing market. We want to have a large population density within a 5 mile radius, typically 200,000 folks within a 5 mile radius of the property. We'll make exceptions to that if we have insider knowledge about small markets, or if we're just more familiar with those markets. The second thing we look for is just, where's the market trending? Is the population increasing or decreasing? How are wages trending? How's the job growth in the market? Because we want to make sure that we have tenants that are going to be able to fill up this building, or going to be able to pay their rent. So we look for those things first and foremost. In most communities, most listeners can probably picture the hotel commercial corridor where there's a lot of hotels. They're usually really well located because these properties were built in the 70s, 80s, 90s in areas where there isn't any land anymore, but it's right down the street from restaurants and bars and shopping. And it's convenient to transit lines too. So for our tenants, these are folks who make too much that they don't qualify for government help, for rental assistance, but they don't make enough that they can afford that Class A luxury place down the street. Our our rents are usually $300 to $500 less per month than that Class A luxury product. And so, as we're looking into it and we're underwriting the deal, we want to make sure that, with our costs and our minimum return profile, we're still staying, well below that Class A luxury, because we want to make sure we can fill up the properties.
Is it fair to say that the target for this is more like young professionals who are working, but maybe early in their career? So, to your point, not making a whole lot of money, but they still have, the desire to be in the action and be close to amenities and things like that?
That is one of our three core demographics. So there's three core demographics we look at. One is those young professionals that you just described, the folks that are, leaving a roommate situation, or, leaving home, leaving their parents' house for the first time, looking for their own space that they can feel that independence and, be near where they work. The second core demographic is that kind of working, middle-aged working professional. These are, nurses, military folks, in some of our communities, dock workers, um, medical professionals commonly. And then the third core demographic is the later in life, fixed income, kind of retirement age. They don't need any, healthcare support, any assistance. They're kind of aging in place, but they also don't need a lot of space. A lot of times it's single folks, but more commonly couples, maybe with a pet, that fit that demographic. So we appeal to a wide spectrum of folks, and try to design our community such that they can kind of welcome all types.
Yeah, and you mentioned before that, one of the things you look for is that population density, right? So, within a 5-mile radius, 200,000 people. So these are largely going to be major cities, major metros, not necessarily tertiary markets that you're investing in. As you look across the projects you've done, like, can you maybe name some of the cities you've been involved in?
Yeah, so we're in 6 states right now. So I'm based just outside of Seattle, Washington. That's where
Yeah.
Sage's headquarters is. We've got an office here in Kirkland, Washington. That's where I'm talking from today. So we have projects in the Seattle suburbs of, Bellevue, Washington. It's a luxury market. Some of the highest cost of housing in the United States. We're also south of Seattle in Tacoma. That's kind of a sister city, a little further south. We're also in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Columbia, South Carolina, Dallas and Houston, Texas, and looking at expanding into Florida and Colorado later this year. We've also done projects in Arizona.
Yeah, and I think that's important to understand, right? Is like you've got a great balance of locations, but you're all over, right? You talk about expanding to Florida, you're in Washington, like you can't really get much further than, the upper northwest and the tipping point of the
That's right.
southeast, from Florida to northwest. So I think it just goes to show from a nationwide standpoint, affordable housing is a challenge, but it doesn't mean people want to sacrifice the amenities or the quality of life or the access to transportation or the access to nightlife. And being creative and being unique is a way to solve that. And that's kind of what you're doing in this space. Is there any like, surprise that you came across going down this process? Because this seems all fun and interesting and fun and games until you start swinging those hammers and open up walls and get an aha, oh crap moment, right? So talk to me about maybe some surprises that you've come across.
Oh, we've had many. We've learned a lot over the 24 hotel conversion projects that we've done. I mean, our first one that we did in the state of Washington, I think we went 50% over budget on our
Oh,
construction budget. The last one we did, we came in under budget, even though we had a 10% contingency. So we've definitely rolled a lot of learnings in. I think the most important thing is really understanding entitlement. So basically, you've got this property that is zoned for commercial use typically. It's operating under a commercial use permit, and we need to convert that over to residential use. And depending on the jurisdiction, depending where the property is, that process just looks different. We have the benefit of now having two individuals who are kind of our advance team to help us solve some of those problems well before we own the property. We've got a head of planning internally who's a former architect who helps lead that permitting process. We have a head of community relations too that engages with the local politicians, the city council, the HOAs, the community members to really make sure that they feel bought into the project as well. We want to make sure they understand what we are and what we're not, right? We're trying to solve a real need for their communities. And a lot of times these hotels have fallen on hard times. They might even be harboring crime. And we've got some fantastic case studies of being able to clean up communities. So I'd say solving the entitlement risk is the big bucket up front. We need to make sure we have that path to change the use from commercial to residential. I think the second bucket of risk is the construction work itself. You mentioned cutting open walls and being surprised. We've been able to refine our process for inspections. We actually fly the same inspector across the entire country when we're looking at properties, because he's really refined what the scope of work looks like. And we actually cut open the walls before we own the property. We'll put it back for the seller and make it look right. But we want to see, what is the plumbing stack? What did the plumbing stacks look like that we're going to be tapping into? Do we need to, replace pipes? Do we need to upgrade electrical service? We're doing sewer scopes, thermal scans, a lot of heavy diligence, doing, lead and asbestos testing, all the things that you would expect us to do. And through that process, we fail out a lot of properties. There's just one in Tucson that we were looking at a couple months ago that, we had to walk away from. But that's good. That's good. We want to have that pressure test. The second bucket of risk is just finding a good, capable contractor to do the work. Sometimes we're spending almost as much on the renovation as we are on buying the building itself. Our typical renovation cost is between $35,000 and $45,000 per unit for these properties. So we want to have a capable contractor that can deliver on time and as close to or under budget as possible. And so our construction team is building out the plans, the design, and then they're interviewing 3, 4, sometimes more contractors for each one of our projects to pick the best fit for that project, for that location, and that's really important to manage. I'd say the last bucket of risk is just on the lease up itself, just making sure that we're underwriting to conservative rents, that we know we can fill it up, that we've got a strong property management partner, typically working with those regional players that have 25 to 30,000 units under their portfolio, where we can get a good amount of touch. They've got a good pulse on the market, but have enough scale that they can support our growth in that market.
Yeah, Ryan, you touched on a few things there. One, just understanding the execution risk, right, when it comes to the building itself, understanding the landscape, entitlement, understanding the jurisdiction and the process there, just getting all the key stakeholders on board, which, from political standpoint, is just the game you got to play if you're in this space, right? You got to make
Yeah.
sure everybody's on board, they understand what you're trying to do, and they can back the investment or the project. And then also having the team to execute. So both from a contractor standpoint, then the lease up with the property management team, the leasing agents, making sure that you've got all those things in place. When you when you think about these projects, and I'm thinking about all the work that goes into it. You mentioned that some of these renovations are about $35,000 to $45,000 per unit. So these are really heavy investments. I'm thinking about how the deal comes together. What does the capital stack look like if you're working with LP investors? Assuming you're getting some sort of financing to take on these deals, like how much leverage are you getting from banks? Can you talk a little bit more about the capital stack and just kind of how this deal comes together from a financial standpoint?
Of course. Yeah. It typically takes us, good rule of thumb is about $100,000 per unit to create this housing, which is about 50% of the replacement cost. So for 100 to 200 units, somewhere between $10 million and $20 million in total development costs. We have an evergreen fund that we welcome investors into, that we welcome LPs to invest alongside of us. That's been operating since 2020. That's the first tranche of capital that comes into each one of our deals, typically between 25 to 40%, maybe 25 to 35% of the capital comes from LPs in our evergreen fund. The second tranche is from senior debt. So we're going out, we're getting a loan. There's really two types of lenders that we're working with. We're either working with the local community banks, credit unions, or we're working with a private lender or a debt fund. Now, the local banks and credit unions, we love working with them. They feel really invested in the community. We're typically only getting access to that type of capital when we've already been in the market before. But once we are, it's really great capital. We have some fantastic banking partners there, and we're getting development debt between 6 and 7% right now. And these are for properties that aren't producing any income for the first 6 to 18 months before we start leasing them up. So that's really attractive, usually a bridge to mini perm product. And then the second pool of capital are those debt funds. And so they're going to be a little bit higher leverage. So call it up to 80% cost of capital, or 80% leverage loan to cost. But we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay closer to 10+% for that capital. And we're usually looking to refi after we complete the conversion and stabilize the property. Because what ends up happening is we see the large increase in valuation and we like to recapitalize that equity. We're actually closing on a refi today of a project we bought 18 months ago. We put $7 million into it and we're pulling out almost 5.8 million 18 months later, just because of the power of forcing that appreciation from converting what was a kind of derelict, crime-ridden hometown suites asset into a vibrant apartment community.
Ryan, I asked this earlier. I'm going to ask it a little bit of a different way.
Yeah,
This feels like a lot of work.
it is.
Why not either focus on value add multifamily with existing properties and you're just going in and renovating them, or just going ground up where you don't have as many surprises about what lies behind the wall? Why not do ground up or just focus on value add?
I don't think the returns are there in either category. I haven't seen a deal that has looked compelling enough for in either of those categories in a while. And that's because the cost of capital skyrocketed over the last 3 years. The cost of labor, the cost of materials have all gone up, and the prices haven't adjusted in the market. And so if you look at ground up, I mentioned earlier, we're creating these properties for half of what it would take to build them from scratch. And so that's an incredible value. On the value add multifamily side, and there was a large run up in values of multifamily properties in 2020 and 2021, and that's what we were doing before. But we saw a lot of capital flood in there. Seller expectations went up, and the returns weren't there. And our capital, as partners, myself, Ross, and Emily, our capital is invested through our fund. We're kind of the largest shareholders in the fund, and this is a wealth generation tool for us as well as our 400 investors that are alongside of us. And so we want to be focusing on the best risk-adjusted returns. And value add multifamily didn't feel like the thing anymore. We don't want to assume that there's going to be market rent growth because we don't know that there is going to be. There's been a huge run up in housing costs. We don't know how sustained that can be. We'd rather control our own destiny, do the hard work, but unlock the value from the hard work.
Ryan, I appreciate that because you hear of terms like replacement costs or replacement value, and sometimes those words may not have as much weight if you're not really in this space. But what you're getting at is if you go ground up, everything just costs more today, right? So that to build something from scratch, you're going to spend $200,000, $300,000 or so to build that per unit. Whereas you're taking something that already exists and renovating that, that's going to, be a more favorable return. Now, in multifamily, value add multifamily, the challenge is there's been so much demand for that value added multifamily that starting off basis point is much higher, where it's harder to get the value creation by going in and doing that. So instead, what you've done and what you found is by going to similar asset classes like hotels, like motels, and renovating those, you can get it at a great basis. You can get it well below the replacement cost but still come in, do the renovations, and create value for yourself and your partners. And I think the big takeaway for us is just being innovative. Maybe thinking outside the box, figuring out how to solve the problem. If you're not getting the deal flow that you're looking for, or you can't make the numbers work, where can you step back and be creative? And sometimes it's looking at different asset classes or even reimagining the asset class. Let me ask you this: as the market is kind of, settled and, maybe we can call it a reset of the overall economy and some of these commercial real estate industries. Do you feel that there's a change coming on your strategy, or do you feel like none of that really is big enough to change the way you're going to approach the business?
I wouldn't say I don't see a negative change happening, potentially a positive change, but we kind of haven't underwritten for that. Where I see that potential positive change coming is just in the lack of supply. Because of the run up in costs, like we were talking about earlier, John, many developers have been pencils down for a couple of years now, and it takes 3 to 4 years to build a new apartment community. And if you look at the data on permits, that's a leading indicator to see when are those properties going to be delivered. I think by December of last year, it was the biggest gap between deliveries and permits in history. And so if you look forward to 2026, 2027, 2028, if you wanted to deliver apartment community in that year, you would have had to already start it. And it hasn't been started. So I think there's going to be diminished supply coming to market. I think that could bode well and be actually a tailwind for our strategy, just because there'll be additional demand. If there's a downturn in the economy, I don't wish that on anyone. I do think that our strategy has resilience. If you back test it against, previous economic, challenging times, I think being a naturally affordable solution for folks is good. When folks are in distress, it's unfortunate, whether they have to sell their house or downsize, being that option that people can go to when they need to be a little bit more financial conscious and a little bit more budget conscious, I think puts us in a good spot. Certainly overall rents might be under pressure, but I feel really good about being where we are because we're not trying to chase what's the top of the market, right? We're trying to be that solution for folks that really need it.
I love it. If you guys want to learn more, you can check out Ryan and his team over at Sage Investment. Ryan, what's the URL for your website again?
Yeah, it's sageinvestment.com.
There you go. So check that out. We'll make sure you can learn more there. We'll put a link to it in our show notes. Right now, we're going to transition and go to our round of insights. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmoncapital.com and click on the mastermind button today. All right, Ryan, give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Ooh, good question. You think about this one, John. I think my biggest failure as a leader has been the lack of delegation over the years. I don't think it's like an acute failure, but one that had been systemic over some time in my personal life. I know a lot of us have big aspirations. We want to grow. We want to do more. And if you're a type A, hard charger, you want to take it all on yourself to be able to do that. You think you're the best one. And I think the biggest learning I've had has been, certainly I've taken that burden on, compromised my health, my sleep. And when you make the hire of the right person who's had the experience, what you thought was possible can be blown away. And so I think it's the challenge of taking on that burden and not seeing the opportunity to bring on someone who could do it better. I think is probably my biggest learning as a leader, and being okay to let go and to transition from being that player into that player coach. I always, we try to be that. One of our core values is, there's no small task. Everyone sweeps the floors. We all want to roll up our sleeves, but finding the right person to do it, who might even bring some more experience, really can set you up for a lot of success. So I encourage others, even if you're starting small, there's a lot of great tools out there. There's a lot of great individuals that might want to join you in that. And so there's some phrase there's some saying, if you want to go, you can go alone. You're not going to get very far. But if you want to go far, go as a team. So that'd be my biggest learning.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for our listeners.
My favorite tech tool is if you're someone that does a lot of email, Superhuman. It is the best email client out there on the market. It saves me hours and hours every week. I don't get paid for that endorsement. I tell everyone about it. I love it. A few other things that I'd plug for those that are, that are doing value add multifamily or other development deals. OpenSpace.ai is a really cool tool that we've been able to use to 3D scan and overlay on the plans and track progress with our contractors. That's been another one. And then the last tool that I'd probably plug is Athena. if you're looking for someone that can help you as an executive assistant, Athena's got a really great program, really cost effective, fantastic supporter, fantastic team members that can be part of your team to help you, scale your time and do more.
All right, give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Ooh, um, it's actually sitting on my desk right here. Uh, and it's kind of with that theme of getting more scale over your time. It's Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. So that's been one that's been gifted. It was first gifted to me by another real estate operator, and it's one that I've also gifted around now too.
Love a great book there. All right, give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Mm. Daily habit that stays to stay focused on my goals. I start every morning by looking at. I've got a kind of a Kanban board. If you don't know what that is, it's just think of it as like a series of lists, digital lists that you can kind of drag and drop across. And I start my day there with, what are the personal things that I'm trying to accomplish over the course of the next week? What are the professional things I'm trying to accomplish over the next week? And then what are those things that I'm delegating to others or I'm waiting for others? And that's kind of my mental organization model. Those four categories. It's like, so it's what am I delegating and waiting for from others? What am I trying to do professionally? What am I trying to do personally? I think that habit has helped me have clarity when there can be so much noise and you don't know where to focus. I think that structure has brought me clarity and just being religious about writing things down so that you can keep it all organized in that way.
Give me your number one insight for investing in, let's call it commercial real estate conversions.
Mm. Basis is the only thing is the thing that matters most. You make your money when you buy. Uh, Being patient is important to help that happen. It takes us up to 2 years on average from when we start talking to a seller to when we'll actually buy their property because we know what our minimum return thresholds are to do it. I'd say don't compromise on that. Be patient. You make your money when you buy.
Love it. All right, let's lighten the mood and go in a different direction. You're up there in Northwest in the Washington area. Give us your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Ooh, good question. I love food. If I'm in the mood for there's there's a place if you're in the mood for a view and you're in Seattle, M Bar Rooftop has a view of the lake and you can watch the seaplanes land. I think that's just like a cool atmosphere. It's got some good bites there, and it's just something so unique about Seattle. You can see the Space Needle and then seaplanes landing and dodging sailboats. It's just a really cool environment.
Bar it is. Ryan, you give some great stuff, man. Just talking about your background and getting into hotel conversions. And I loved your point on basis, right? Just understanding, one of the things for you was really getting hard to find value add multifamily deals that pencil because the prices have gone up so much. But on the same note, ground up development was challenging because that cost is so high. So finding the blend, taking existing structures, converting them into apartments, that's where you found the sweet spot. And you've been able to do that over 24 times through your fund and through the company you have with Sage. And I just think it's great to just think about ways to create value and to find solutions that may seem out of the box, but ultimately allow you to drive value for yourself and your investors. Again, for those folks who want to learn more, go to sageinvestments.com. We'll put a link to that in our show notes. Ryan, I want to thank you again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.